in January rose to 27.6 billion rand. Now, this is a deficit much larger than expected from a revised 15.3 billion rand. There was a surplus in December. This is according to the latest trade statistics released by the South African Revenue Services. This happened on Wednesday. The trade deficit was the country's biggest in over a decade. But analysts say while it was a surprising number, it is not entirely negative because the surge in imports was a sign of an economic rebound. Let's get a little bit of understanding from this. Christo Luus is in studio and he's got a much better understanding of what South Africa's trade data actually means. Christo, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Lee.
All right, help us out here. Talk to me about what the deteriorating trade balance and what does it mean? Just explain.
Of course, the first reaction would be, but the rand is strengthened.
Yeah,
hey?
yeah.
So that will have an effect. Of course, there are always two components to trade. If you look at both imports and exports, that's the volume effects, and then there are the price effects. And the way in which these two components interact can have very different outcomes for your trade figures from one month to another. That's why I don't personally like to look only at the month's figures. Okay. So we've got now the figures for January, and the way that the Customs and Excise does it is that they start accumulating now, and in December we have the figures for the whole year. But what I normally do is I look at 12 months rolling sort of figures. And if you look at that, then, and you compare what has happened up to January, end of January, with, for instance, exports, then 21 of our 23 categories are still up. There's definitely been an uptrend in dollar terms and rand terms of our imports as well as our exports. So the import and export growth has been positive. Imports was in fact in a bit of a slump in, say, 2014, thereabout, 2014-15, but that's picking up. One must expect...
The currency as well. I mean, we've got to
one must expect, if the currency appreciates, that the import intensity will increase because it's getting cheaper to import machinery. That's our major imports. Yeah. Machinery and equipment and so forth. And unfortunately, we have to work harder to sell our exports because they are becoming more expensive abroad should the currency appreciate.
I mean, if we have to look at expectations, and it's a hell of a gap between the expectation of a 5 billion rand shortfall as opposed to what actually came through, a 27.6 billion rand shortfall.
But
what happened?
I don't think, there was also the oil price effect. But I mean, these things are sort of hedged long before. So at the prices that the contracts are signed, normally those are the prices that we're paying. And we may even see some more, weakness in exports, strength in imports going forward over the next couple of months. But first of all, I don't think the rand will remain. The rand is now overvalued against, say, especially the euro and the pound and currencies like that. It's sort of on par with the dollar. But my personal view is that this is still something that will work out. So my sort of view is that we will have a rand of about 12.50 by mid-year. That shouldn't jeopardize our trade account or our current account in a severe way. We've had a 6%, and if current account, of course, includes all the services. This just looks at the trade, the physical trade, but a big component of our foreign trade is also related to services, about 20-25%. Yeah. And if you take that into account and you add that all together, then we could be moving from, say, a 60-70 billion rand trade, or rather current account deficit in 2013, which was 6% of our GDP, to something very benign, say 2% last year, more or less, and 2.5% this year. So I don't think that it's severely threatening that prospect that we've looked forward to.
I want to talk about something and very quickly, because we're just ending the interview, but I need to talk about VAT. I mean, we've been hearing so much about it. I mean, this is trade deficit. That's something very different to something that is going to hit everybody's pocket right now. And come April, VAT going up by 1%. And I know there was a petition handed over to Parliament yesterday, thousands of people, organizations signing this against the rise in VAT, and please asking, begging that something be done. And there are other ways of getting in funds as opposed to VAT. What do you think? I mean, do you think the other way is obviously increasing that basket of items that are not included in VAT? Or do you think VAT is the only way for South Africa to get out of the problems we find ourselves in?
I think the way where we are now, it's probably one of the best ways. The alternative, I mean, I would have preferred further cuts, but we have sort of cut to the bone now. Some 85 billion rand would have to be taken off expenditure, which is a rather substantial amount. So you must then, what is remaining, you must get from taxes.
Yeah.
And if you now look at the range of taxes, I think they are, as the Minister has said, I mean, if you look on a worldwide basis, our tax rates are high, both for individuals, for workers, and for the corporates.
Yeah.
So then I'm afraid the only option that is left is VAT.
Yeah.
And it isn't really such a unequal tax as people make it out. So everyone that spends pays. If you spend more, you pay more.
Yeah.
So if you buy a car, I mean, the VAT on that is substantive.
But your basics, I mean, I know they've left 19 items,
yeah,
I think, off, but they would like to see that increased.
Expanded.
Is that perhaps one way?
I think that is the way to handle it. Of course, you will have to have some give and take. I mean, you won't then get I think they budgeted for about 20 billion from the VAT, so maybe they will get a little bit less, but that will help the poorest of the poor, and that's probably one of the options that they will be looking at.
Christo, thank you very much for talking to us here on the program. Christo Luus is an economist with Quantech Research, talking to us firstly about the country's trade balance in January, rising quite a lot, which alarmed a lot of people, and also about that VAT increase that comes in the beginning of April. Let's take a break, and after this, we